So we are back in mission control, and I was just checking out this rescue mission, and it's going to take a lot of Delta V, something that I don't think I'm quite ready to start doing. It's going to take along the lines between 10 to 15,000 Delta V, which means we're going to have to create some kind of vessel that gets refueled in orbit, meaning that we'd need some kind of station with lots of fuel up there, or we'd need to do several launches to launch fuelers. And then refuel it in orbit so that it can have enough fuel, since I can't actually launch anything with that much Delta V, at least not easily, or really, I think, with the parts that I have. So what we're actually going to do instead, because I was also looking that we still have this thing we haven't quite done, and over in the contract menu, there is this one, perform seismic surveys on Minmus near a particular site. And of course alpha, beta, gamma, delta sites, but this one's also worth a huge chunk of money as well. So because of that, I'm thinking that I can knock out both of these at the same time and total myself, what, around 160 plus another 100, 260 plus 300,000, so about 550,000 funds. Not to count the advances either. Really, I guess I just picked up another 100,000 advance, but that will actually easily put us over. I mean, we have enough, almost enough right now to actually upgrade this, but that would leave us without enough to build a craft. But I do want to be able to upgrade this, the Research and Development Center, so that I can grab this tech, specifically this tech, because this will allow me to start mining on Minmus and the Moon, so that orbital stations are easier to refuel, because pushing fuel through Kerbin's atmosphere and gravity is really inefficient, so it's definitely going to be much nicer to be able to mine, as well as rescuing Billy Bobvis. I had a plan to use for these drills here, and it also involved upgrading the tracking station, but we'll talk about that. Some of you might be able to figure out what I'm thinking. But some of you also, I believe there was some people did reply, they want me to actually spend a little time in here building something. Well, before we do that, I actually want to go check something out. So, we have our contract, which means we just need to click on something that's orbiting Minmus, because I kind of want to figure out where this area is. Okay, so it's over here. Actually, that is really close to our previous science ships, and I know we still have Bob and Valentina down there. No, wait, we brought Bob back. We have the other scientist. But we do have Valentina down there, and she does have a lander that is capable of... it has a seismic scanner on it. So I might actually be able to just take that vessel over. Actually, let's find this thing. Let's just fly this one. That might actually be really convenient, because then I don't have to... I can just bring a probe. I don't have to... Well, I could have brought a probe anyway, but... I mean, this lander... It looks like it has plenty of fuel. It's still got half of this fuel tank, which we've seen is more than enough to basically go from halfway across Minmus. And those sites are right over there. So even if she only makes a one-way trip, she can always just come back, like EVA fuel, because Minmus is such low gravity. Even this thing might have enough fuel to handle it. So we've landed at the final location, and we'll grab the last bit of that science. Although we're not actually grabbing any science, but we are gathering scientific data for the contract, which just gave us 200,000 credits along with the 27,500 from each individual experiment. Now, just looking at my fuel, I don't believe in any way I have enough to actually bring Stelina back in this craft. That's not to say that this craft can't help get her back, though. So what I was thinking is if I take this craft and I actually fling it, basically just fire it off so that it starts along its way, then I can use Stelina's EVA propellant to slow her down and she can get back to the science lab. At least that's the idea that I have, since, I mean, these crafts, I suppose they can be refueled, can't they? I do have a docking port on the side. I could refuel them, or I could always bring more because they're rather lightweight, but there's no real intention of them coming all the way back to Kerbal. So I think I'm just going to bring Stelina back by use of method of figuring out where they are. Okay, so that's the opposite direction, meaning my target is this way. So I just had to figure out where I was headed first off. Of course, I am going to have to head up a decent bit to try and avoid this mountain. So there we go. This thing has no more fuel left, which means that it can't do anything. It's just going to crash. And because we're moving at about 100 meters per second, I don't think that I can just stick the landing legs back and have it not crash. That only works for about up to 40 to 50 meters per second. Any faster than that and it's kind of unreliable. So what we're going to do is we're just going to face this thing up like this. We're going to EVA Stelina and grab her jetpack and send her along her way. Of course, she'll get her own orbital line, which means that I can actually keep using the EVA propellant, at least a little bit of it, to get her to her craft. So there we go. She should get pretty close to it. And of course, this also means that that is going to crash eventually. Now, eventually it does crash, however, we're so far away and the angle is kind of bad, you really can't see anything. Although during this entire time I was trying to observe it while I'm slowing down, trying to at least get a good shot of its explosion, but there's not really anything there. It just kind of flashes for a second and bursts into little bits of shrapnel, which then proceed to just skid across the surface until, of course, they get destroyed by hitting or impacting a second time. And as Minimus's gravity slowly takes hold, we actually manage to get back. Of course, I do have to slow down a little bit more. And we may have lost both of our small landers, that one being a crash where it just broke legs, and the other one being a rather massive explosion where I'm not entirely sure how much survived. They both served their purpose, since we did manage to get thousands upon thousands of science from Minimus. And of course, we just completed a nice contract by using the other one. And of course, it did help Stelina get back. Although I think with how much EVA propellant we still have, we would have had plenty to get back with without actually needing to destroy that lander. But explosions are always a little bit more exciting. So we'll stick her back in the science lab. She'll begin to generate science again. Not at a very quick rate, but she will slowly do that. And let's see if we can see any debris. It looks like we're too far away. Maybe the map view has some. Nope. It looks like the debris all just kind of faded away. Either despawned or just got destroyed. So we completed that contract a little bit easier than I thought. So let's head back to the Space Center. Now, because of the funds we got from that contract, we probably have enough to upgrade the R&D center safely without diminishing our current funds too much, that we'll still have some to be able to craft or create vessels, more stuff I mean. There's that weird thing where when I right click on the places they appear over there. However, that bug is rather easily fixed by just restarting the game. Although if you know what is causing it, any of you guys, please let me know. I'd really like to know if I can fix it, because it seems to be happening if I go to the Space Center and back a few times. Like, usually if I play more than an hour, it kind of shows up. I'm not entirely sure what it is, though. It's also not really consistent, so it's kind of a weird thing. But we have another launch here because I accepted a contract to launch another station into orbit around the moon. And I thought that because we already have a contracted lunar station out around the moon, we might be able to do exactly what I was mentioning last time, where we launch to encounter, we do a flyby encounter on an orbit, basically. So we fly by the moon and encounter our target orbit, and then we just burn retrograde into an encounter where we slow down our orbit so that it's still a little bit larger than the targeted orbit, but we manage to actually encounter our target ship rather than just an orbit. We're actually going to be targeting a ship. So I figured that it was a pretty good opportunity to try that, plus also begin to build kind of a lunar station that we may or may not use depending on what it looks like in the end, or exactly what we want to do with it by the time we unlock mining or drills and such. Although we will be unlocking our drills later, so next episode will probably revolve around something like setting up the infrastructure, like probes and stuff, scanning the planets, that we can actually start gaining access to the resources. But we'll see when we get there. But right now, all we've done is set up our encounter with our targeted orbit, as you can see, and we're actually just waiting for our vessel to get around the moon's sphere of influence. That way it's a little bit easier to see some of the markers that are going to tell us when we get our encounter. Okay, so we moved into the sphere of influence of the moon, and we have basically our flyby of the moon aligned pretty well with our target orbit, which of course is this other contracted lunar station that we already did, and this is another contract lunar station that we just didn't name. Although we might actually add stuff onto this one. We might even dock the two together. I don't know if this one has a docking port or not. It's easily accessible. We will see. But what we did is we just did what we did last time, where we created our flyby into our targeted orbit, and then of course we just aligned ourselves. However, with the encounter, the one difference you need to do is you of course set this up and you slow down, and this is the point in which you want to align your planes, because this is going to be the most efficient to do so. So you just want to make sure your plane is going to be aligned nice and well. And if you want at this stage, you can also correct for any non-circle shapes you have. For example, because I'm moving in toward the moon early and I'm kind of coming toward the moon at a wide angle, all I can do is I can pull radial out, and that will actually fix this so that my orbit is more circular, much like my target orbit. Now, initially you might think that one node is all you actually need to kind of check this. However, you're not getting any encounter information. If you look, nothing's changing when we move this. So because of that, what you actually need to do is go on the opposite side of the planet, usually at your apoapsis, this will work, and say add maneuver. And then don't do anything to that maneuver node. That is just so that KSP understands to give us information. So now, as I move my retrograde vector and prograde vector, you'll notice this little encounter thing is actually moving around the orbit. And if we zoom in a little, you'll notice that we have our two encounter pieces right here. And currently they're at a 2.9 kilometer separation. Of course, I'm not too sure how finely we can tweak that. 2.9 was closer than 3.2, but I won't complain about either number too much. You know, I'm just messing with it, so we'll leave it at 3.6. But we actually have an encounter now, because what's happening is we're coming in and going here on the moon, and then we're only slowing down to this outside orbit here. And because we're only slowing down to this outside orbit here, we picked this outside orbit. And since we picked it, we can choose how long it's going to take us before we reach this position again. Meaning because we choose how long it's going to take for us to reach this position again, we can align that to the amount of time it's going to take this inner orbit, our targeted orbit, to reach that same position. And because we can do that, we currently are able to encounter straight from a flyby, basically, since we flew by the orbit close enough. So, now all we have to do is actually encounter the thing. So, let's face our node, and I guess get ready for the burn that's going to be happening in about an hour of game time. So if you actually look, we'll kind of watch the satellite a little bit. Now, of course, this only works if you're going in the same orbital direction as the target. Otherwise, when you encounter it, it's just going to be for a split moment, and you're going to have to do a lot of delta V change in order to actually align your targeted orbit. But since we want to basically dock right next to it, this should be perfect. So, judging by how this looks, us coming in, our target is over here. So our target is on the opposite side of the planet when we actually want to encounter it. So when we actually go in for this maneuver node, we'll just get a little closer, then we slow down, but we don't slow down to the same rate. We slow down even slower, or because we're in a higher orbit, we're much slower than our target. And because we're much slower than our target will get to this encounter location before us. So we'll start our burn. Of course, we'll just follow the maneuver node all the way through. There. So, let's look. Our intersections are a little bit off, so what we can do is we can slide this back to the apoapsis, and we can actually still edit this. So we have the second maneuver node to, of course, fix any little bit of errors that occurred. So 2.4 kilometers for 1.1 meters per second. I'd say that's worth it. So let's time accelerate here, not too quickly, just to kind of show you what's going on. So we'll go up to 50, that should be fine. Now, if you look, we are slowing down. As of current, this is our vessel, and we're going to be slowing down. So what's happening is this one is moving faster than us, so our target is going to reach the intersection point, which is what we would expect since it was ahead of us in the orbit. In order for us to get there first, we would have to be in a much lower orbit, which you can do this going into a lower orbit if you have a high enough orbit to start with. But currently, let's look. Our target is at the intersection point. And currently we're more along our orbit than the target is. So by the time the target does a full orbit, because it's going to take, say, 10 seconds for this to do the full orbit, since our orbit is longer, it's going to take us maybe 15 seconds to do a full orbit. However, we have a 5-second lead. And because we have the 5-second lead, which is this distance we've covered already from our intersection point, then we're actually going to get back here at the exact same time. There we go, we did that little burn, which means our encounter is now 2.3 kilometers. And we're at our apoapsis. Our target is behind us, but moving faster than us. And from here, it's nothing more than if you would get a normal encounter with, again, normal craft. Because what's going on right now is we're just moving in close to each other, and then at the closest point along our encounter, all we're doing is burning retrograde to the target so that, of course, we can match our velocities. Now, I just had to open up some solar panels because this thing is probe controlled, and I didn't open up any solar panels to keep it powered, although it did have about 3,000 units of electric charge, so it was all set. And of course, at the closest point retrograde, slow down, and then when we face the target, of course, we just keep moving towards it. And now we've encountered, basically from an orbit around Kerbal. We just launched to our flyby encounter, and then we used the flyby encounter to create a real encounter. And now we've saved tons of Delta V just by doing all in one, basically. Now, I do try and get really ambitious here, because I try and dock these two things together, or I try to dock them together, and none of them have any RCS. The docking ports are only on the sides, so the only way that I can actually do it is by docking the docking port that's either on the bottom or the top of this vessel that I'm currently controlling onto one of the docking ports on the side of the other vessel that I just brought in. So while the rest of this plays out, I'm gonna kind of answer three questions. First off, or three questions that you may have, I'm not sure if you do, but let's see. First off, it is, these episodes are gonna go back to like the every 1 to 3 days that they get released. I will start doing that again, so we'll have a new one of these. Number 2, I do have a bunch of mod spotlights I am working on. I'm just, learning through the mod, letting the mod authors fix a couple of bugs that they talked about. So we'll see some things like stage recovering Kerbal inventory system pretty soon, hopefully. And thirdly, live streaming. Is that something that might be interesting to you guys? Because I had wanted to live stream when I kind of started doing YouTube videos, but I never actually had the availability to do it because my internet was terrible. But because I've been so busy this last week, it's because I moved and I have access to internet that will actually let me live stream. So please let me know, is live streaming a yes or a no? And if so, what are some things we might do? What I'm thinking is I'll just do a test stream where I play just some sandbox or career mode or something for Kerbal Space Program just to kind of test it, see what I need to do for settings, and then maybe later, if that goes okay, do something like a live kind of mod spotlight. Not really a mod spotlight, but kind of I have the mod installed and I kind of show you guys how to use it. And I guess you guys can actually ask questions in case you don't quite understand something about it, because I know I don't quite cover everything in spotlights. But anyhow, that's just an idea. Let me know. Live streaming, yes or no? Please leave comments. Well, there you have it. I honestly never expected that to work, but it was kind of fun actually trying. Docking two craft together using only engines and docking ports on the sides. Now, if I could have used a docking port on the front, that would have been much easier, because then I could just, hold my position up high and then burn straight towards it. But I actually had to kind of get creative, coming in at a kind of strange angle. So with that contract completed, now we can head back to the Space Center and do what we have been wanting to do. After quickly checking what kind of new contracts might be available, I decide to just go and upgrade the Research and Development Center so that we can, of course, have the max tier research and start getting the last bits of tech we want, such as resource mining, the giant engine at the top, and I do pick up the rover wheels eventually, once I kind of decide between my options, because I was considering more plane parts as well as the station parts. but ultimately I decided on rover wheels because I think having a rover that can mine would be easier. Now, before I could grab the last bit of science, or the last science unlock, I needed about 80 more science, and luckily my science lab way out here on Minmus had about 130 for us to steal, or take, after having researched it from data. So we collect that, and we have enough for another 550 science unlock, which, like I said, we do eventually get the rover wheels. Anyhow, this is it for episode 13. I thank you all for watching. This is PTT GRW, wanting to know if you want to see me live stream or not, or at least give it a try. So, signing off.